Hey everybody, Rodman here. Thanks for tuning in to Kerbal Space Program. So, just a quick recap. We have a giant min-miss base landing mission in progress here. But I am going to quickly rename some of the other missions that I have out here so that they are not going to become confusing. That's the first thing I want to do. So, Tansby out here is manning a mission to observe stuff. We are going to call this the Solar Observatory. Alright, done. It just sort of sits up here and does nothing. Maybe we fetch him at some point. I know, it's kind of dark to leave him up there, alone, stranded, but that was always sort of the intent. Then we have some min-miss relays. We have this micro satellite. So let's rename this min-miss micro min-miss probe. It's really a probe. It's not even a relay. Back to the tracking station. I'm just doing some janitorial stuff before I continue. RHD-11 orbiting Kerbal. So this is the space station of sorts. It's big, it's ugly, and it's my space station. It has a lot of unnecessary parts on it, which I guess bothered some people. I don't know why, as when I built it, I did explain it was going to have an excessive amount of useless parts, just for design and fun. But there it is. And back to the tracking station once again. Once I complete this missions, I should really rename them properly. Now, I believe this is a proper relay that we left up there. Yeah, this one's a little bit more relaying than the other one. Let me turn off the lights, though. I don't think a relay satellite needs lights. Min-miss relay. Cool. And that might just be about it. I'm not entirely sure you can rename the deployed central stations. But yeah, let's see if you can. I don't think you can, but if you can, I might as well rename them like Kerbal Science and Mun Science or whatever. No, you can just disable it. Can't really rename it. That might come in some sort of future patch. Now, about the goo. South Sickle made a comment about the goo containers not completing, saying that any game that started before the DLC tends to have that problem of the goo missions being impossible to complete, whereas any game that started afterwards, started with the DLC, was able to complete this. So, my weird collected, an impossible to complete Mun mission here, or I was really on the Mun mission. That is a direct result of just enabling the DLC, you know, before, while I had a game in progress. And there's not much I can do about that. Alright, so, last episode didn't air because I screwed up the video feed, and boy does that make me nervous about doing that again. So let's go ahead and set up a refueling probe. The sad thing is, I built one. Right here. Yes, I built a refueling probe already. So instead of rebuilding it again, which would be... I could, but really all it is, it's not even asparagus stage, it's just one big refueling probe. I'm just gonna launch this up and refuel my mission that is up there. And as I blast off, you'll see how it works. It's really, really simple. It's a uncomplicated piece of machinery, this. So excuse the extraordinarily loud blast-off noise. All I'm going to be doing, it has a bunch of kickbacks. All I'm going to be doing is making sure that my thrust weight is around 1.3, 1.4. So I'm not using up a lot of liquid fuel while breaking the initial atmo. And you can see my thrust weight is here. the purpose of this is to bring enough fuel to the RHD-15 base that is going to land on Minmus for the base to then be able to complete its requirements of 6K liquid fuel. Instead of just bringing a whole lot of extra liquid fuel, which would get it done, but would cheese it a little bit, I'm bringing both liquid and oxidizer. And the sort of purpose of that is that base, once I complete the mission, I'm actually going to fly home with all of its beautiful, beautiful science taken from Minmus. So there we go. We have a little bit of spin going on. Oh, I am tilting the wrong way. So I'm going to try to spin back normally. I'm somewhat wildly controlling this. This is, of course, probe controlled. There is no pilot. It has a lot of RCS on it, so I can dock with the other big craft. And I should open up my maneuver so I can see my apoapsis without going up to the map screen. It has 5 gimbaling engines, which allows me some semblance of control here, even though I do not have, even though I don't have, like, fins or anything. So this phase up here, down here, is going to be detached sometime during circularization. It's just mainsails and a whole lot of fuel. And then up here, it's skippers and a whole lot of fuel with some RCS so that I can more carefully dock with the craft that is up in orbit. It has a big, way more monoprop than I probably need. And in its service bay is just the probe core. This has nothing else. This ship's only purpose, once it is docked, will be to be another relay, but I'll probably actually just get rid of it, as its relay antennas are not all that significantly powerful. Alright, so that is my rough circularization here. 80, 80, okay, there we go. And about halfway through this burn, I'm going to be required to stage off my back. So right now I am using my reaction wheels to try to tilt towards the next maneuver. I'm actually gonna start doing the burn a little early. I'm in space, so I'm getting full efficiency of these engines. And burning a little early was the right call, because the node's in 10 seconds and the burn time's 50. Doesn't need to be perfectly circularized. Rough is just fine. So part of me wants to either wait for a patch. I'll probably leave those goo collecting missions, because I don't need to get rid of them necessarily. These collected goo stuff. What I could do is try to edit the save game file and just complete them by, let's call it cheating, because I definitely collected enough goo on Mun to complete it. It's just not going to complete because I enabled the DLC after the fact. Rather than to just set it up so that it's failure. Alright, so I have a little circularized orbit. Let's match the tilt. Something like that. Perfect. Warp to next maneuver. Now, before I do the transfer warp over to min-miss, I really have to be sure to extend my solar power panels. The reason is, and I think I've explained this before, but it's worth saying multiple times because it's really damaging if you don't. A probe powered rocket, when it runs out of power, dies. If you have solar power panels, even if it dies because it's in the shadow of a planet for a very, very long time, the moment it gets more solar power, it comes back to life. If you don't have your panels extended, it can never come back to life. So it is quite important to have your panels up and out and facing the sun in order to not have your rocket die on you. And it's most important to do before long time warps, because long time warps will drain the bejesus out of your power. Alright, so my ascending node is a tenth of a degree off, that's fine. Let's do a transfer burn here. Well, first make sure that, yeah, I'm still circularized and orbiting. Yes, I am. There we go. That's a periapse of 1.8K. See if I can't do a little bit better. Okay, that's a very close periapse. I'll probably not exactly nail down that that burn there, but it's fine. It takes about 900 or so delta V to get to min-miss. And I'm aiming for RHD 15, which has a particularly strange orbit. I just put it into like whatever orbit I could achieve to save fuel. So now I have to match that particularly strange orbit with my craft here, which is totally fine. I'm just making note of it. I have about 9.6K fuel left on my ship. I only need about 3,000 and change to make this refueling worth it. I had about 3+ K on RHD 15. I'm going to need at least a little bit of fuel to land on min-miss, and then I need 6K left in the tanks to achieve the mission here. Now, if I designed a more efficient, fuel-efficient rocket, or I used bigger engines, or I took more time on the burn, I might not have to do this refuel mission. But the purpose of the refuel mission is I do have a milestone right now that the current milestone is set up to require me to rendezvous 2 vessels in min-miss orbit. So that's why I had a 2-staged refueling mission. It makes it a lot more expensive, mind you, but it allows me to complete that milestone. So at the moment, I'm just sort of chasing milestones. And eventually the milestones will lead me out of min-miss, Mon, and Kerbal and bring me to Duna and other places like that, which is exciting. So now my periapse is, it looks really low. So if I look at RHD 45 or 15 here, it is orbiting counterclockwise. So I'm going to correct my orbit. Oh, you know what? I have a little bit of an issue here, don't I? I need to extend my antenna. I was not really I wasn't able to really control my my craft because the antennas weren't enabled. All right, so now this periapse here will allow me to circularize at about the right altitude to min-miss to match orbit of RHD 15. It was a screen message that I did some more weather surveys. Cool. I'm a little worried that all of the Breaking Grounds deployable stuff is going to be broken because I added it post scenario. We'll have to see. Okay, so what I need to do is let's do a maneuver sooner than later. Putting my periapse over here, like that. And somewhat circularizing. I'll just fix the periaps first. Well, you know what? I'm just gonna orbit and fix it all later. In fact, it could be fun to have like a ballistic trajectory maneuver. I'm not necessarily opposed to that. That could be fun. And by that I mean rendezvousing with that other craft sort of head on. And then trying to match its speed without colliding. Sort of a interstellar gravity approach. Well, gravity, not an interstellar. Don't mix up my my movies. A gravity approach of like really dangerous and reckless and hilarious. Alright, so there we go. A little bit of the circularization. It's a very, very ugly orbit. I want to get rid of Minmus Relay and get rid of Minmus Probe, so I'm just not looking at it. I just want RHD-15, setting that as a target. At the moment, I need to do a little, I need to match its, match the tilt here. So that I can intercept it a little bit more easily. So that will do. It's only a 20 meter per second maneuver. I have 5.6k fuel left, which is fine. Now, as you can see, it is orbiting this way, and I'm orbiting this way, so we're not orbiting the same direction. And like I said, I did that by design. I thought it would be fun. For this really small Delta V maneuver, I'm going to shut down all of my 4 outside rockets, because I don't need that much thrust. And it's easier to do smaller adjustments if I don't have massive, massive rockets blaring. I could even thrust limit the one I have. Okay, so now we're more or less on the same plane here. As you can see, we're lined up. So the next thing I need to do is some sort of intercept maneuver. And I just created a random maneuver here that intercepts head on, but intercepts right here. And I'm trying to minimize the amount of separation. 4 kilometer separation seems pretty good to me. What I'm gonna need is then to thrust limit this. It doesn't really matter. I'm gonna thrust limit it to 10%. So I have very, very, very little thrust. Warp to next maneuver. And let's do the burn. Because it's Minmus, and Minmus has such a small gravity well, because we're in a head-on collision, it won't take a lot of Delta V to basically turn directions, because I don't have a lot of velocity relative to RHD-45. Its velocity is 20 meters per second. My velocity is roughly 20 meters per second. If we were orbiting Kerbal, our velocities would be massively, massively, massively different, and it would become a real problem. But that's just not the case on Minmus, which allows for sort of a head-on collision scenario, which isn't that much of a problem. Think of it this way. Orbiting Kerbal is like NASCAR, 2 cars going in opposite directions of NASCAR. Orbiting Minmus is like 2 Roombas going on for a head-on collision. One is a lot less serious than the other. And actually, that analogy isn't even all that perfect, because it would be like 2 inchworms versus 2 like Concorde jets. I mean, the speed differences are immense. You know, like 16,000 versus 220 or so. That's like the equivalency here. So, teeny little micro adjustments. Our separation is 23 kilometers, but that's fine. I'm going to warp. I'm going to warp to it. Now, here's the thing. It takes 8 days for that intercept. Actually, we could have gone orange first, because we're almost hitting here. But That's why it's very, very, very important to have your solar power panels up, because 8 days is a very, very long time. All right, so now the speed distance between these targets is about 60-ish kilometers, or meters. Oh God, kilometers per second, that would be a nightmare. Meters per second. So what I'm going to do is burn retrograde and reduce that while trying to center our trajectories so that we are more likely to rendezvous closer. So right now it's 22 kilometers, and as that time approaches, I'm going to bring that in as much as I can. So here we are in almost, I wouldn't say a head-on collision because we're pretty far from one another. As you can see, I'm doing very, very small adjustments. I have a thrust limiter, and I'm only using one engine. And our separations are decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. Okay, I actually overthrusted in the opposite direction. There. Now we have a separation of 200 meters. I got it nice and centered by doing micro burns. At this point, I am going to enable all thrust, and I am going to accelerate time until we're basically in a head-on collision sort of way, and then I'm going to fire at my engines to slow down. So if we look, it is here at 60 kilometers away. This is sort of like the math problem of like a train leaving Philadelphia at 40 meters per second heading to New York, and a train leaving, yeah, that's basically what's going on here. So now it's 7 kilometers away. 4, 3, 2. All right, it's upon me, and I'm going to match its speed. So now we have a speed difference of about 2 meters per second, which is a brisk walk, not even. And I have to start the boarding. I'm not particularly good at docking. I just wanted to say that very, very clearly. So now we have a 4.4 meters per second, which is like Granny in a walker. I have plenty of liquid fuel left on this ship. I'm going to get even closer to this big bad boy. And then I will start docking procedures. So I'm going to be, first off, let's get rid of my nose cone. I'm going to be controlling my ship from my docking port, and I'm going to be targeting its docking port. So that is my target. Now what I want to do is I want to line myself up behind it. So instead of flying straight at it, which I'd be coming at an angle like this, I want to go this way and then that way. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Because coming straight at it from an angle like this is not going to yield me a whole lot of success. So what I need to do first is to figure out which way is up on my ship. We are in, of course, space, and I am flopping around like a fish out of water here, trying to figure out which way is up. So I think I've figured out my, my up here. I have plenty of monoprop fuel. I don't want to burn it all this way. Alright, so up is, yep, alright, I have my axes correct. So now I'm going to blast forward a little bit and then point retrograde to try to get behind this craft. And the probe computer is doing a little bit of heavy lifting because I'm just using the retrograde. And is up still up? Up is not still up. That is unfortunate. So once I am sort of behind it, I'll burn off my relative speed to it, which is about now. I'm still only using my center engine because I only want micro adjustments. So I want to aim downwards So I need to first rotate my craft. Alright, and now down is down. And I'm trying to line myself up as well as I can for a nice, smooth, and easy docking. So as you can see, I'm above it a little bit. So that's why I'm aiming down. And all this could be done with docking. I just find it a little bit easier to do. A little bit easier to do with the engines. My probe core seems to not be able to do prograde and retrograde anymore. I don't know what's going on. Houston, I have a problem. So now we're sort of lined up, more or less, with it. These really, really big, heavy crafts are kind of hard to RCS, which is another reason I'm doing it this way. So now there's almost no speed difference between me and it. I want to keep my up and downs the same. So let's point... Ooh. I am a floppy fish still. Let's point towards it. As you can see, on many axes, we are sort of lined up pretty nicely. So the next step is to then initiate docking. So what I suggest here is to make sure you know your axes and your hotkeys. If you don't know both, that's going to be a problem. So if I go into docking mode and I hit I is supposed to be up. So I need to rotate a little bit here. So I and K are up and down. So I is up, K is down, J is right, and L is left. And that seemed to have worked. I still have a little bit of rotation going on too. If you hit spacebar, you change your rotation, and I want to point straight at the pink targeter. And then I also want my trajectory. As you can see, my craft is wandering a little bit here. So you want your nose cone pointed straight at its nose cone, which is the center of the nav ball to the pink indicator. And then you want this green, let's call it trajectory, to then also match up. So what I'm doing is blasting a little bit. I'm going to start moving forward so that I have a trajectory reading. So now I have all three. I have trajectory here, heading, and target. And you line up all three. As poorly as I'm doing. And nope, stop rotating. All right, rotate. Good. The docking is a little forgiving, and by that I mean the docking clamps sort of have like magnets that aid you in docking a bit. So usually the magnets only work if your SAS is turned off. But here we go. Here is my first attempt at docking. It's not perfectly straight on, but as long as I keep pointing towards the port and keep my trajectory directly at the port, it should be pretty good. I don't have some crazy ISS dragon arm to grab me, like the ISS has. Now with the new robotics, you could probably design something like that, and that is actually somewhat of a cool project to think about. And very doable with a grappling hook and all the robotic pieces. It might not be all that stable, but as you see here, I'm just doing micro adjustments to keep the docking port straight ahead using my linear rotation here. And I am just a few meters apart. Shift is forward and control is back, so I'm also using shift to sort of move myself forward a little bit. And then once I get really close, like I am now, I'm going to try to have the magnets take over. So I'm going to turn off RCS, turn off SAS, and see if the magnets can just glue me, and it will after like a bounce or two, glue me to their ship. I think this is the one right here. Ka-chink. Yep. Good old ka-chink noises, right? Alright, so here we go. We want to refuel. We have 9k total fuel amongst both crafts. What I'm going to do is pick one of my side rockets here, and then pick one of its rockets and type in. And what that's doing is it's emptying these two into this one. And I want to do this one at a time so that it's nice and even. It doesn't change my center of mass. So then I'm going to pick two more, right? And one more, and say in. And what this is really doing is it's balancing out the amount of fuel. I'm taking one can here and putting it into one can here, which doesn't change my center of mass. Because if I did it willy-nilly, what would end up happening is you can see both of these now have 901 and 234, or 2324. If I just shoved fuel in at sort of random, my lander that's supposed to land on Minmus would then be really misbalanced. It might have a lot of fuel in one and not so much fuel in another, and it's really annoying to fuel balance once you screw it up. It's actually super annoying. And then this is the last one. And then, of course, I still have fuel in the middle cone here, and I can show you how to transfer that as well. Good old refueling missions here, right? So if we check 901, 901, 1901, 1901, they're all the same, which means my center of mass fundamentally has not changed. There's still fuel left on this main tank here, right? There's fuel up here and fuel down here. So what I could do is I will first take this main tank here and then connect to all four of the rocket tanks on what I'm refueling and just hit out. And that fills them evenly. And I think what I'll do is I'll leave the teeny amount of fuel in the nose cone here in it. In fact, I will put it in the lower section for center of mass purposes. So that this refueler isn't literally totally empty. Undock. Because if it's literally totally empty, it will be hard for me to reposition it if I want it to be a relay. So this thing now has almost no liquid fuel left. It does have some monopropellant, which I can use as fuel and move around a little bit. So if I hit RCS and hit control, I'll blast backwards and put some distance between me and the lander. That way I don't have any collisions. And then the last bit, which will be next episode, I'm going to land this bad boy on Minmus. As you can see, because I loaded this craft, some of the some of my whirly-hurly or my vomit comet had been sort of flopping around. All I had to do is disengage and re-engage the hinges, and it snapped back into place, which is nice. Okay, guys. Well, that is, as I said, all the time I have for this episode. If you have any tips, tricks, feedback for me, drop me a line. And I do hope that you enjoyed this, and I do hope that you tune in next time. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you learned something. I'll catch you all later. Adios, friends.